Hello, this is Raghav's Take. India's parliamentary democracy is nearly 80 years young. Now, if you plot its numeric graph, you will see a near perfect sinusoidal wave pattern. The first 4 decades saw Congress staying at the peak with majorities in the 300s. That is a 60% plus capture of parliament and similar dominance in more than half the states of India. This was followed by a plunge over the next 25 years when majorities shrunk to between 30 to 40% and coalitions emerged. Congress and BJP exchanged places twice at the helm, mirroring the churn in state assemblies. But from 2014 onwards, the sinusoidal wave has peaked again, with BJP now commanding a Congress-like stranglehold. That is a 60% plus handcuff over Parliament, except of course in 2024, and also dominating more than half the state legislatures. Curiously, they've also swapped their vote shares with an odd exactitude. Congress has fallen from about 40% to 20%, and BJP has risen from under 20% to nearly 40%. It becomes worse when we look under the hood of these domineering mandates to compare the political behavior of the rulers during their 60% plus sojourns in office. Whether it was the Congress in the first 4 decades or now the BJP for a dozen years, the majoritarian instinct has strengthened with every successive victory. The contrast becomes starker when juxtaposed against the largely fair, progressive, and democratic reign of the coalitions from the early 1990s through 2014. Often we dismiss these coalitions, often we forget that revolutionary economic reforms, a second nuclear test, a military victory over Pakistan in Kargil, the unthinkable India-US nuclear deal, the Right to Information Act, the Food Security Act, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, Manrega, very high GDP growth, real public sector privatization, digital inclusion including Aadhaar, the creation of the GST infrastructure, and much, much more. All of this happened under these so-called weak coalition governments. And that begs a critical question. Is there a structural impulse, perhaps even a constitutional aberration, that's created such a symmetrically repetitive, even sinister pattern? One that's not been very healthy for India's democracy. To answer that question, I asked myself another question. Out of the top 10 countries on the Human Freedom Index, as many as 9 out of 10 use the proportional representation or the PR method of electing governments. Switzerland, New Zealand, Denmark, Luxembourg, Ireland, Finland, Iceland, Sweden, and Estonia. What a remarkable lineup of enviable, successful democracies. And they all use PR, proportional representation, to elect their rulers. But India follows the first past the post FPTP model, which creates brute majorities even with minority vote shares. So now that begs the second critical question. Did our Constituent Assembly consider the merits of the PR, proportional representation method? If yes, why did they reject it? Here's the shocker. There were 299 exceptionally wise, educated, and experienced leaders. Ambedkar, Nehru, Patel, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, Rajendra Prasad, B.N. Rao, K.M. Munshi, Kriplani, Asaf Ali, Amrit Kaur, Kidwai. I've just named just a few illustrative few of these intellectual giants. Strangely, this galaxy of the greats dismissed the merits of proportional representation, PR, tritely, in an offhanded manner. To be fair, of course, there were a few worthies who tried to raise the issue. Here's a quote: "The one pervading evil of democracy is the tyranny of the majority that succeeds in carrying elections. The only remedy is proportional representation. It increases the influence of thousands of those who would have no voice in government, and it brings men more near an equality by so contriving that no vote shall be wasted and that every voter shall contribute to bring into parliament a member of his own choice and opinion." This was a pleading by Qazi Sayyid Karimuddin. He got some support from members like Zahirul Lari and perhaps a handful of others. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was dismissive. And here's another quote: "Proportional representation by means of the single transferable vote," underline this, single transferable vote, "is not practicable at all. These are very large constituencies. Further, we are not an advanced country. Many of the people are not literate." Now, here's the second shocker. I have emphasized, you saw I emphasized single transferable vote in Ambedkar's quote. Why? Why did I do that? Because that's not the most scientific or widespread form of proportional representation. Instead, it's what's called the list PR, which is the system that's literally the real thing. Parties create lists of candidates, ensuring gender, ethnic, religious balance in sync with their political ideologies. Candidates are elected to parliament in proportion to the votes polled by respective parties. Let me give you an example. If parliament has 100 seats and your party gets 40% of the votes, example, the BJP that gets 40% of the votes, then the first 40 candidates in your list make it, who in this case, if it's the BJP, are all likely to be Hindus, including Brahmins, OBCs and Dalits. If you get 20%, that's pretty much what the Congress gets, then the first 20 of your listed nominees are elected, which may include 10 Hindus, 6 Muslims, 2 Sikhs, and maybe 2 tribals. If you get 5% of the vote, for example, the Bahujan Samaj Party, BSP, your 5 candidates are likely to be Dalits. If you get 2%, example, the AIMIM, you will send another 2 Muslims to parliament. Now, my example is simplistic. I concede that. In practice, several enhancing complexities can be added to reinforce the egalitarian impact of lists. But at an elemental level, what I've described in my example adequately describes what's called the list PR system, the list proportional representation system. It ensures greater inclusion of disenfranchised communities. No ballot is wasted as vote shares are fairly translated into numbers of seats. Ultimately, a pluralist democracy is created as opposed to a monolithic state. Isn't that the classical definition of a just democracy, where an equitable coalition of interests comes to power, putting fetters, checks and balances on a potential abuse of majoritarian forces? But India's Constituent Assembly did not consider the list PR system even cursorily. It just briefly discussed the single transferable vote model, dismissing that with virtual contempt. So it would be fair to assert that India created its constitution without as much as a rudimentary consideration of the world's most successful model of electing governments. Isn't that extraordinary? Simply unbelievable. But again, let's be fair. The lawmakers' intentions in unquestionably adopting the first past the post system, the FPTP, were noble. They were paranoid about creating unstable coalitions that could lead to the fragmentation of a scarred infant nation. Most of the people, the members of the Constituent Assembly, were Congress leaders who believed their party would retain its compelling national footprint and it would remain a secular umbrella coalition of regional, ethnic, and religious interests. They believed, perhaps naively, that if the majority supported a progressive centrist political party, then Indian democratic institutions would stay robust. I bet none of them foresaw the rise of regional, parochial, narrowly ethnic, and vigorously communal identities. And that brings me to the penultimate question, the great what if of history. What if India had chosen a list PR system of proportional representation to elect its national government? In that situation, no leader in the last 75 plus years of independence, not Nehru, not Indira Gandhi, not Rajiv Gandhi, not Prime Minister Narendra Modi, all of whom actually won by big parliamentary mandates, but none of them, no Prime Minister would have commanded a clear majority in Parliament. All of them would have had to rule by consensus, by fostering coalitions. Now, to the final question. Would we have been a stronger democracy today? Would our constitutional institutions have an independent spine, been more robust? The answer, my friend, is unknowable, unreadable in the toxic haze that has shrouded our capital city. This was Raghav's take